Namaste, everybody. Thank you for coming back to the Ancient Wisdom channel. Today is a very special day for many reasons. One is that it's the Jewish New Year, which also corresponds to the new moon, which was just, I think, a couple of days ago. And today is September the 19th, 2020 in South Florida. And today you're in for a really delightful treat because we have a wonderful guest. Many of you surely already know her, but for those who don't, her name is Christiana Gaudet. And Christiana has been a full-time sought-after tarot reader for more than 20 years. She does readings, coaching, and mentoring by phone, webcam, and in person when there is no pandemic going on from her office in Palm City, Florida. She also does tours and all kinds of events. She's been on radio and TV and is a headlining speaker at festivals and conferences throughout the country. She's written books and has an amazing list of credentials, the details of which I'll include in the description area below the video, so you can find it there. And so, Christiana, namaste. Thank you so much for coming to the Ancient Wisdom channel. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's a real pleasure. So I think today we're going to be talking about how we can improve our lives with the tarot.
Perfect.
I know that you're an expert at that and you're going to have many beautiful things to say about it.
Absolutely. And I think that for the uninitiated, people think about the cards, very much from the perspective of predictions, fortune-telling predictions, that kind of thing, which is great. That is entertaining, it's fun, and very often the cards really can give us a heads up of what's going on, which is a great thing, or what's going to go on. Tarot is such an interesting thing in that we seek readings with others, either casually with our friends or with professionals like you or me. But tarot is also something that can be a deeply spiritual personal practice. And so I always say to my students that, yes, it is great to go see a tarot reader, and please do. We like it when people come for readings with us, and we want to encourage that. But I think the single best use of tarot is as a personal tool for the individual. And I know that there is this whole thing about how you shouldn't read for yourself or you can't read for yourself. And it is true, I think, that if you're looking for an objective voice, seeking a reading is a good idea. But there is so much more in the study and practice of tarot than simply reading or having a reading. And it starts, I think, with the study of the cards. And when we study the cards, very often we're thinking about, okay, let me memorize what this means. What are the keywords? What are the associations? What does this mean when it comes up in a reading? And that's good. But even better is recognizing that each card is a spiritual lesson. That each card, as we learn it, teaches us something. And as we study the cards, as we study the order that they're in and the stories that they tell in their order, as we study the archetypes, we are forever changed just by that study. And so, very often students will say to me, I'm worried that I'm not good at tarot, or I'm worried that I won't be good at tarot. And my answer is always the same. Don't worry about being good at tarot. Worry about how tarot is good for you. And I feel like when we study it the same way we would study a book of spiritual wisdom, from there, of course, we become good readers, because at that point we really do grasp what the lessons of the cards are. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And I think then when we talk about divination in a self-practice, you know, I am all for sort of the light fortune tellery stuff. It's fun. I love to get together with friends and do it. I love to divine for my clients and sort of look at what we see coming down the road. And it is helpful to have a heads up about things, right? But the other thing is, beyond showing us what the possibilities for the future might be, tarot tells us about ourselves. It helps us understand ourselves. And I think when we talk about the spiritual journey, so much of the spiritual journey really is the journey towards self-understanding, don't you think?
Absolutely.
And the cards help us with that as well. Since the cards can pretty much tell us anything that we might ask them, if we look to the cards to show us ourselves, both in terms of recognizing that there are cards that will be associated with us because of numerology, because of astrology, that kind of thing. And also just like shuffling your deck and saying, okay, who am I today? And pulling a card, it can be so very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like I'm a real sort of evangelist for this way of working with the cards, in recognizing that no matter what we're going through, the cards can offer comfort and insight.
Mm-hmm.
But even more than that, on our day-to-day journey through life, the cards give us wisdom for living every day.
Mm-hmm. I find that sometimes also doing a reading, even for ourselves, sometimes they remind us of what we already know, and we just need to be reminded. We need it affirmed from like some other source.
Absolutely. I think confirmation is a lot of it. And in fact, I hear that from clients all the time. They're like, yes, thank you for the confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, you know, I am one who believes that to some extent we are all psychic. We all have some access to intuition, some access to communication with spirit, however we see that or access that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe, so here's my theory, right? It's all about the third eye. If you look at the third eye is our eyesight, it's our intuition and our psychic vision, and it's our imagination. Now, that's a really interesting thing to think about right away, because when we go into psychic study, we're really afraid of our imagination. And that's because most of us, when we were young, we had psychic things happen, and the adults around us would say, oh, it's just your imagination. So as adults, when we come to this study, we desperately do not want it to be just our imagination. We want it to be a real and valid thing.
Yeah.
And so we shut down our imagination and then therefore shut down our intuition. But tarot, as a series of images, we use our eyesight to see them. The images stimulate both the intuition and the imagination. And so, you know, there are many great psychic tools and techniques, but I think all cartomancy, you know, not just tarot, but even oracle cards and all of that, I think are really particularly good for this reason, because of using those three things in the third eye: the eyesight, the intuition, and the imagination.
Mm-hmm. And I think also, you know, the images are representative of things that are for, you know, thousands and thousands of years in the collective unconscious, in the collective consciousness of humanity. That's what the archetypes are. And so they're speaking to us through those images, and we can draw from that to get the message.
Sure, and the archetypes are an interesting thing, and you and I may have a difference of opinion around how long these archetypes have really been valid in the human experience. Although, you know, to your point, if you look at an archetype like the Empress, the mother, well, yeah, since the beginning of time, you're absolutely right about that.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that all 22 of them would fall into that category, but
Okay.
maybe, you know, that would be an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
But certainly some of them.
Yeah.
And what I find is fascinating along with that is that, you know, certainly tarot, esoteric tarot as we know it, has really been around for a few hundred years. But in that few hundred years, we have seen so many changes to society, and tarot changes in the way it speaks. So, for example, the Chariot, when esoteric tarot was first being developed, people did not have cars. And yet now, in 2020, well, maybe not, let's say 2020, because our cars stopped being important all of a sudden. But prior to the pandemic, our cars were really important, right? Like really part of your car is part of your personality, your brand, how you get where you're going, your job, everything. And so the Chariot would then show up to talk about your car very often. Chariot comes up reversed, your car is going to be in the shop for sure.
Mhm.
And yet that wouldn't have been the case in the 1800s,
Mhm.
but then it was. And I had another experience. I started my business in Connecticut where they had built two very big casinos, the Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods, right? And so I noticed at my tarot table, and at that point I was doing just local readings. I wasn't doing phone, or we didn't have Skype. This was a lot of years ago. But I noticed that the Wheel of Fortune would come up suddenly for people getting jobs at the casino. And then eventually it would start showing up with the devil for people developing gambling addiction. Never had I seen that before. And now, you know, once in a while it might come up that way now, but I'm not in a place that's really in the shadow of casinos, so I don't see it so much. So it's funny how these archetypes will sort of come to mean what they need to mean. And even during the pandemic, all of a sudden, the Seven of Swords is the COVID card for me.
Aha.
So it's interesting how that works.
Wow. Well, if you have the Seven of Swords handy, it would be cool to see what that
I
looks
can
like.
find it. It's going to be one of these 78.
It's okay if it's too, you know, difficult, but I thought it would be kind of cool to see that.
Well, the Seven of Swords is such an interesting card. And of course, the suit of swords has to do with the element of air in most decks, and therefore having to do with powers of the mind and the intellect and communication and integrity. And seven, of course, here we are. Okay, so here's the Waite Smith image of the Seven of Swords.
Mm-hmm.
And seven tends to be a number of the individual, the things that you have to do, the things that no one can do for you, the decisions you have to make. Now, it's interesting to note that very traditionally, the Seven of Swords is known as the Thieves card, and will very often come up to talk about a lack of trust, either in yourself or someone else, or someone betraying your trust. And what we see in the image is someone is stealing swords.
Wow.
Okay? And you know, this crosses into an interesting territory when you start doing readings about health. I recognize we're not doctors, we shouldn't make diagnoses, blah, blah, blah. But health is part of life, and it does come up. And over time, I've done readings where I've said to people, you know, you really need to get to the doctor very quickly. And that turned out to be good advice. So anyway, take that as you will. I had noticed in the past that the Seven of Swords would sometimes come up for people who were receiving cancer diagnoses. because it's, you know, cancer is one of those diseases that comes up like a thief in the night.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that mean that every time the Seven of Swords comes up, someone's going to get cancer? Of course not. Of course not. But as the pandemic came and more people are asking me, you know, am I going to get COVID? Will anyone in my family get COVID? Will we have a death in our family because of COVID? This is a card that would very reliably start to say, first of all, you are really at risk and you need to be careful. Or I'm afraid that there will, you know, your family will be touched by this. And then very often I hear from them and I hear the way in which that has happened. Now, my hope is, you know, when we talk about, well, there's a couple things here. I really believe that, I don't know, 8 times out of 10, a prediction is something that can be changed. You know, forewarned is forearmed, but it's forearmed very often to do something different. Yes, there are some things that are coming like a freight train and you're going to have to deal with it. And so being prepared is better than not being prepared. But very often we can do things to change it. And so I think that's an important thing to recognize, especially with something like a communicable disease where you can always try to be more careful.
Absolutely.
Now, that brings up another way, though, that tarot can make our lives better, because not only does tarot teach us spiritual wisdom, not only does tarot tell us about ourselves, inspire us creatively, and maybe give us a glimpse of the future, tarot also is a set of magical tools. Since every one of these cards carries an energy, you can use these cards to bring an energy into your life or to release an energy from your life. So to go through the deck rather than at random, but cognitively, to look at things that you might want or not want.
Yes.
And use the cards to either bring or banish those energies. And you can even do that in divination. If a card comes up that's like, yeah, no, I don't really want that. Okay, well, let's release that energy right now. And so that's another way that tarot can really help us in our lives.
Beautiful. The cards can be used as an anchor for visualization.
Right. Exactly.
Yes. So we can choose cards from the deck that represent something that we want to create in our lives. And it could be a whole picture. It could be a series of cards that
That's exactly right.
represent, it could be like family, people that you associate with your family, and you can put those together if you're trying to heal a relationship, for example, in your family, or even with a romantic partner. It could be.
Ooh, so that brings up a really interesting issue. Yes, absolutely. However, there is that ethical realm of, as soon as you start doing energy work around another person, like I get phone calls all the time from people saying, can you help me get back together with my ex? And I mean, technically, magically, yeah, you can. That can be done.
Okay, I'm not talking about interfering with another person's free will.
Exactly.
I don't believe in doing that.
Exactly,
I don't
right.
believe in that, but to help myself, if I were to use it to heal my relationship as an anchor for visualizing, say, a healthier relationship.
Beautiful.
To help my own energy, my own consciousness.
Sure. And even, I would go as far as to say to bring in, say, okay, you might use the Two of Cups to bring in the healing power of love, to remind you of how much you love the person. If you're having a hard time communicating, like, even with people you love very much, there are times where like, we're just not communicating. The Page of Swords is a wonderful card to bring in the energy of communication and to be, open to each other's communication, to find the right words for ourselves and to hear each other. So yeah, absolutely. Suppose you need a new home. You're looking for a new house or a new apartment. The Ten of Pentacles is the Castle card.
Okay.
and will help you manifest what you want in real estate.
That sounds really good, especially for me right now, because I am looking for a new home.
Oh, well, here, breathe with that for a minute.
Thank you. So that was really, really beautiful. Before we sign off, I want to make sure that people know how they can contact you if they want a reading, consultation, mentoring, or any other kind of information. How can they reach you?
Sure. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So my website is my name, christianagaudet.com, or you can go to my mirror site, which is tarotbychristiana.com. I'm pretty all over social media. You can find me on Facebook, Christiana Gaudet, or my personal page, Christiana C. Gaudet. I will be happy to friend you. And you can find me on YouTube. My channel is Christiana Gaudet. See, there's a theme there, right? On Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Christiana Tarot. And LinkedIn, Christiana Gaudet. And I also want to let you know, we are starting a new conference, an International Tarot Conference, starting in January. It will be an annual conference. It looks like we may have to go online for this January for obvious reasons, but ultimately it will be in South Florida every year. It's called StaarCon. That's spelled StaarCon. And so StaarCon.com is a place that I'd love to have you go. And we have just started a podcast. You can see the video version of it on our new YouTube channel, which is StaarCast.com. I'm sorry, StaarCast on YouTube. Sorry, the channel StaarCast on YouTube. And you can get the audio wherever you get your podcast. So I'd love to have people check that out as well.
Cool. And we will have much of that information in the description below the video to make it easy for people to capture that information. So before we sign off, would you like to pull a card for us and do a little mini reading for the new moon or new year?
Sure. Well, yes, absolutely. As you mentioned, it's Rosh Hashanah. And also coming up this week is the autumnal equinox in the northern hemisphere, the vernal equinox in the southern hemisphere. So either way, it is that moment in time and space where day and night are of equal length and we are in complete balance, and then we move off in one direction. And for those of us in the northern hemisphere, it means we're going into the dark time of the year. And as you say, it is the new year and the new moon. So let's do three cards.
It also corresponds amazingly astrologically with some really important shifts in planetary positions in sidereal, which is what I follow in astrology, where
so cool.
The nodes are about to change signs. In fact, right now we're at 0 degrees and just a few seconds of the nodes, which take a year and a half to go through one sign. So we've been in the same sign with them for a year and a half, and it's about to change. So we're all going to feel, I think, some incredible transition and change with all of this happening at the same time.
Wow, that's huge. That's huge. I've been feeling like the Mars retrograde is kicking my butt. I got to tell you that.
Maybe I'll have a look at your chart sometime and see where it falls.
I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
All right, so I've pulled 3 cards. The first card is about that point in balance, you know, how to use the energy of balance that happens at the equinox. And what I got is the 5 of Cups reversed, which is an interesting thing because it's about holding space for grief, but also recognizing that wherever there is grief, there is also hope. And so it is that balance of grief and hope. And that could be a really good focus for us right now. That, you know, so often as spiritual people, we're not quite comfortable with grief, but grief is a part of life. And I think there are times when we can also be so much in grief that we forget to have hope. And so this is asking us at this time of balance to balance grief and hope together. Now, as far as the new year, welcoming the new year couldn't be better, and this bodes well for you as well. There's that 10 of Pentacles.
Okay.
And so as we come into the new year, this is about honoring our homes, the possibility of a new home for those who want it or need it. And there's also something so special in this card about our ancestors, recognizing that everything that is happening, our ancestors are with us, and honoring our ancestors, and recognizing too that as we move into this new year, we want to be ever mindful of the world that we are creating for our children. Now, finally, there is the energy of what it is to go into the dark half of the year. And you're laughing because here it is, the Fool.
Beautiful. I love it.
Is maybe the most important card in the deck, as it represents each one of us on our spiritual journey. But it's also this very light-hearted card. And when we think about going into this dark half of the year, we think about introspection. We think about the fact that the sun is going away. Here in Florida, like, no big deal, really. I'm from the Northeast, where it was a very big deal. I don't like the winter. That's why I'm here now. But this tells us to go into this new half of the year with a light heart, to recognize that, we may be fortune tellers, we may predict the future, but at the end of the day, anything can happen. And to go into the future with faith in ourselves, with faith in higher power, with faith that whatever comes next, it's going to be okay. And to do it with a song in our hearts, with a smile on our faces, knowing that no matter what we know or don't know, we can do it with the joy of a child, and it's going to be fine.
That's very, very beautiful. And it fits so perfectly. I remember listening to a talk once by a minister who was talking about faith that creates miracles. Just by the act of being faithful and going forward in a consciousness of joy, goodwill, and positivity, in that alone, that is a creative force, and it can create beautiful things and miraculous things that we cannot anticipate. We can't see those things in front of us.
100%. And that, I think, so speaks to the Fool and to what that archetype is. Absolutely.
So thank you again so much for coming to Ancient Wisdom Channel. Christiana, I hope to have you back again sometime, maybe talk about some things a little more deeply. And many blessings to you. Happy New Year. And I guess that's it for now. So for anybody online who's watching this, please remember to like, subscribe, and share this if it was valuable to you. And stay tuned for our next video. Namaste.